listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
We're back with our regular Triple Crown Nutrition Spotlight, answering listener questions with Triple Crown feed specialist Stacy Andersen. This month features an answer to a query submitted by Shannon, who asked an important follow-up question to our discussion about feeding the insulin-resistant horse. There's a lot to keep track of when you're keeping a horse with a chronic health condition. Your veterinarian should always be the first place you go to for advice, but with some insight from the folks at Triple Crown Nutrition, you'll have more information to work with as you partner with your vet on a plan to keep your horse healthy. Listen in. This is episode 148 of the Stall and Stable Show, Q&A with Triple Crown Nutrition. Today's Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. I'm your host, Helena Harris. Please support our sponsors as they make these episodes possible. Thank you very much to Triple Crown Nutrition for being a part of this series and to American Stalls. You can find out more about them at stallandstable.com/support. Welcome back, listeners. I was very happy to get a follow-up question from a listener about the topic we talked about, the topic that Stacy and I talked about in our last Triple Crown Nutrition Spotlight. And it is complicated to keep a horse with a chronic health condition, especially something like insulin resistance or some other metabolic disorder, because it can be fatal and it can be that way very quickly. So we have to be super, super careful. And we definitely have to work with the veterinarian on making sure that we're doing the right things and we're taking the right steps to keep our horse safe and healthy. But feed is a big part of that program. So Stacy joins me today to answer this follow-up question. Here is the question. I enjoy this episode, but was curious why there was so little focus on ESC, NSC, and starch in commercial feeds. I have IR, which is insulin resistant, EMS, and PPID horses. And my understanding is that guaranteed sugar content is far more important than protein for these insulin-sensitive types. Thank you very much, Shannon, for bringing this up. We didn't have enough time, really, to cover all of these things in the last episode, so we're going to dedicate this conversation to that question. So let's welcome Stacy back to the show. Welcome back, Stacy. We get to talk about food again.
Yay! I'm so glad to be back again. Love being here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have a follow-up question to our last episode, which was submitted by a longtime listener. I like this question because it just, sometimes we throw a lot of data out there and there's a small thing that's missing, but it's an important thing. So the question submitted by Shannon is this. I really enjoyed your last episode, but was curious as to why there was so little focus on ESC, NSC, and starch in commercial feeds. I have an insulin-resistant horse, and my understanding is that guaranteed sugar content is far more important than protein for these insulin-sensitive types. That's a great question, so we're going to dig into this a little bit deeper today.
Yes, absolutely. And so thank you so much to the listener for bringing this up. These are all things I wanted to get to, but, a short time period here that I come in to visit with Helena. So, yes. So the last time the question was specifically addressed about a horse that had metabolic syndrome, and the person was trying to figure out which balancer or light feed that they should be feeding. So we know that there are some horses with metabolic syndromes that need calories, right? So a balancer or a light feed may not be for them. So we kind of have to separate those horses in our brains a little bit into kind of two sort of categories there. So I will say, for horses that like the horse we were discussing in the last conversation, the easy keeper, probably a little overweight, eating forages, just needs a balancer or a light feed. It really is not as important to have a the lowest of low NSC balancer or light feed for that horse. The big rock for that horse is its forage, because that is 95+% of what that horse is eating each day. And then a balancer or a light feed where you're only feeding 1 or 2 pounds a day of, the difference between something that's 10% ESC plus starch versus 12% ESC plus starch, and you're feeding just a pound a day of a balancer to that horse, is insignificant to that horse's diet.
Okay. So that's what I was thinking because, there was a time where we thought Brody was insulin resistant or getting ready to become that. And we had to soak his hay in order to get out any excess sugar. So really, I'm just going to say this in a slightly different way. The amount of concentrates that we're feeding these horses and the guaranteed sugar content in that is insignificant compared to what's in their forage. So we're splitting hairs where we don't necessarily need to. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So for a horse like that, number one, you have to make sure that their forage is right. And I know that is so hard for some of us, right? We're in boarding situations. We're in a situation where we're boarding our horse has pasture and they don't even offer hay in the summertime because there's pasture out there. If you have a really severe metabolic horse, you might have to move.
Yeah.
Because you can't fix that with a pound a day of a balancer. You can't fix a 16% non-structural carbohydrate fresh growing grass by deciding on a 9% NSC ration balancer versus a 12% NSC ration balancer. And I know that's awful to say because that's a huge adjustment, right? But unfortunately for those really sensitive horses, the forage is first. The forage is the big rock.
What is the recommended volume of feed for 1,000-pound horse who's in light work for the balancer?
So 1,000-pound horse in light work on ration balancer, 1 to maybe 1.5 pounds a day for a ration balancer.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's what I give to my horses. And it really is not a lot. So whatever the guaranteed sugar content is in that really is negligible. And my horses are, I would say, light work. They're not high level competitive horses, but they get ridden 3 to 4 times a week. So I just want to kind of put that out. When you're digging that scoop into the grain bin and you look at what you're actually feeding your horse in terms of concentrates, this makes more sense. Okay. When would there be, in your experience that you know of, a situation where a horse is so sensitive to any kind of sugar or starch in their feed that we would say, yeah, even a pound a day is dangerous?
Good question.
Is that rare? I mean, should we ask a vet that question?
It's pretty rare. In those cases, so when a horse is having an active laminitic episode, sometimes during those cases, I will have the owner even take them off the ration balancer for a short period of time. We're making sure we're soaking all the hay. We're making sure that we're feeding very small amounts of forage and feed multiple times throughout the day, right? So just because something is super low in carbohydrate, like a soaked hay, doesn't, for a horse that is in an active laminitic episode, it may not be the best idea to throw 10 pounds of it in front of the horse right then and there. It's one of those things where maybe if it's 1,000-pound horse, maybe you're offering 4 pounds and you're letting them eat that for 2 or so hours. And then you're offering another 4 pounds so that we're slowing them down. And that can be really challenging because many of these horses with metabolic syndrome, their hormones are such that they are ravenously hungry.
Yeah.
So slow feed hay nets, soaking, finding the lowest NSC forages that you possibly can. That being said, once we're kind of through the critical part and we're kind of bringing that horse back, we do want to reintroduce vitamin mineral supplementation, especially when we're soaking hay, because not only are we pulling carbohydrates out of the hay by doing that, we're also pulling vitamins and minerals out. And for this horse to actually recover, bump its immune system back up, help to regrow good hoof, we need to make sure that horse is getting proper vitamin mineral. And if it's really, really sensitive and severe, maybe it's one of those things that even though we're only feeding a pound of ration balancer a day, we're doing 1/3 of a pound 3 times a day instead of the full pound at one meal for those horses that are really sensitive. And generally, in those cases as well, we're looking at medications. Like maybe does this horse need to be on metformin? Does this horse have Cushing? Does this horse need thyroid L? Like all these different things, because generally horses in that situation, there's something else hormonally that is going on with them as well.
Yeah. And I know that current research that's keeping an eye on ACTH levels, especially as they fluctuate seasonally. What's coming from the environment, what's inherent in the horse's circadian rhythms and all that fun stuff. So there's always a big question mark about what we're fighting against. So there are some horses who have to eat concentrates because they don't have the teeth They either don't have the pasture to graze, even if it's not high in sugar, but they can't process, they can't chew forage. They have to be on a concentrate. What do we do in those situations?
So, as things are progressing and we see horse owners taking immaculate care of these horses, like to the point where the horses are outliving the life of their teeth. Horse owners are just taking such good care of these horses. And I actually tease a couple of my scientist friends, like, if you can come up with a way to grow new teeth in horses, you'll be a millionaire. Like,
Yeah.
people really want to have their 35-year-old horse live forever, that kind of thing. So in these cases, we do oftentimes have horses with things like Cushing disease that and these horses can no longer chew hay. Now, this is the time where the NSC or the ESC plus starch of your feed and fiber sources is really important, because it's a big rock. Your horse is eating probably close to 20 pounds, 15, 20 pounds a day of these things. So this is where the carbohydrate values can definitely make a difference. Lots of good products out there. Alfalfa pellets generally are low in non-structural carbohydrate cubes if the horse is still able to handle the fiber length of a cube. Lots of senior horse feeds out there that are very low in carbohydrates. Triple Crown has several that are high calorie, low carbohydrate, that are very safe. And again, in this situation, some of these horses will sort of learn that, like, okay, you put your big bucket of stuff in front of them, your big bucket of mash, and they sort of learn to graze, and they kind of come and go from their senior feed and their wetted pellets and things like that. Other older horses like this are like, oh, my 10 pounds of, my low carb feed. And they want to eat 8 pounds of feed in one meal. And that is not ideal for a horse with a metabolic syndrome like Cushing. So lots of unique things that you could try to do to help slow them down on that. But again, for these horses that can't eat longer stem forage and you're having to provide everything as a soaked mash, if you can feed 4 or 5 times a day, smaller meals, spread it out, that's going to be safer for them as well. Because even when things are low in carbohydrate, if we eat a bunch of it at once, we're going to have a bit of a blood sugar spike. Same kind of idea with the horses, in addition to the other GI issues that can occur when we overfeed a horse at each meal.
Right, right. In my downtime, I'm always thinking of ways to make multiple feeds in a commercial horse barn, in a boarding facility, how we can do that. Because, there's always staffing issues and there's timing issues, and making small meal delivery to horses is it's just not time effective right now. So I'm always trying to build a better mousetrap when it comes to, well, how can we change workflow in commercial boarding barns to facilitate smaller feeds? What about, so I know I'm going to say this, and I know you're going to answer very diplomatically, and so am I, but we do have some of these online communities that are, the point of them is to help educate their followers, but sometimes things get a little wonky. I think there's some good information in them, and there's some not so good information, but the rules about what they preach seem to be getting more and more strict every day. So when people take care of their horses and they're following something that they've learned online, it could be in a podcast, it could be in a Facebook group, it could be on Reddit. I just want to encourage you listeners to talk to your veterinarian or a credentialed nutritionist, because it's very easy for misinformation to get woven into good information. I know I'm looking at Stacy right now. She is nodding her head so emphatically.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
And, coming from a lot of people like, oh, well, the feed companies are, they have this secret agenda, or they're just in it for their profits. And I can assure you, people, that behind every feed company name or brand are a group of people who spend morning until night working to make a good product so that your horses are healthy. They're not out there making Honey Nut Cheerios or Fruity Pebbles. Tell me a little bit, just briefly, about the research that goes into the products that you represent.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Triple Crown, we based the foundations of our nutrition on the NRC requirements for horses. And I'm sure many of you understand that the NRC, it's this massive accumulation of research that they
What
put
does
together.
NRC stand for?
The National Research Council.
Okay.
Yep. So they put together the NRC, the nutritional requirements of horses, and they don't come out very often because there's so much information to go through, to condense, to peer review, that type of thing. So we use the foundations from that, as well as we work with varying nutritionists. So not even just our own personal nutritionists, but we actually hire nutritionists as well to work with us. And we work with companies that manufacture animal feed ingredients, horse feed ingredients, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, pre and probiotics, digestive enzymes, digestive supports, etc. And we are constantly educating ourselves on this. So when we as a team and our nutrition staff find something that we think is going to be beneficial for the horse, we all get together, we research it in every way, we ask every question, we do a trial, make sure it's going to work the way that we want it to do, and then we will add that to our feed line. More recently, we've added chromium to a couple of our products. So that is something that we highly vetted the company that provides us the chromium supplement.
What's chromium? Because I only remember it from the periodic table in 10th grade science.
Yeah, so chromium is a nutrient. It is more recently allowed by the FDA in horse feeds. It can help with performance horses in terms of helping to reduce heat stress and improve recovery more quickly. And there is some evidence also that it can help horses with insulin resistance and metabolic concerns, helping to reduce blood sugar, that type of thing. Also, some evidence, some new stuff coming out that it could actually help horses with things like PSSM and that type of thing by kind of changing the way that those gates for the sugars are like opened in the horse, if that makes sense. So for all of those reasons, and we've added it to because we felt it was so important for horses on ration balancers, because typically those horses are easy keepers, we've added it to our ration balancer and our gold line of products. So oftentimes a new product or a new ingredient for one of our products is in-depth research by us for upwards of 2 years before we even decide to try it out and bring it to market.
I spent a lot of years in product development. Now, it was in the software industry, but products typically solve a problem, including feed. And so you start with the problem, and then you start to research the solution. And then as part of that research, you look at what ingredients you have, what's going to go into this particular product or product line or iteration of a product. You might start with a bag of Triple Crown Senior. That's your flagship version, right? And then it evolves over time based on research, based on customer demand. And when I say customer, I mean horses or horses' bellies. So I find a lot of comfort and inspiration that you've got companies who spend the time and the effort in product development. You're coming out with new things, and that's not easy to do. It takes the concerted effort to do that is huge. So I just want to throw that out there that the folks behind the curtain are not just sitting back with their feet up saying, oh, look at this, we're going to put another bag of feed out and it's got all this sugar in it, but we're not going to tell anybody. That does not happen.
Doesn't happen. Period. End of story.
That's just me waving the flag for, and I'll say that it's not just Triple Crown. I can't speak for everybody, but we can say that for the most part, this is the business you're in, but you're in it for good reasons. The best interest of the horse.
Yep. At Triple Crown, all we do is horse. All we do is premium. We don't have a medium line. We don't have a low end line. All we do is horse. All we do is premium. The majority of us that work here have had horses or currently have horses. I think all of us have at least one dog, many cats, any kind of animal that has come into our lives is like well received and hosted by us. We've had stray cats here at the office and they have been welcomed into our office. That's just who we are. Actually, it's funny. I saw a meme this morning, like behind any strong woman is a dog or two that follows her to the bathroom every day. I shared that with my colleagues and they were like, or four and a cat on my lap. And, like that kind of thing. A horse is peeking in the window, kind of thing. So, but yeah, so we care very much about animals, the horses that we feed and the people that are working with these horses. It gives me goosebumps when I talk to someone and go through their feeding plans and I'm like, you are doing an amazing job for this horse. There are just so many wonderful people out there that are going above and beyond. I mean, it's amazing. Just love it. Love working here.
And
So.
we didn't know what we didn't know. So even with people, and I grew up eating Fruit Loops, and that was awesome. And Freakies. I'm totally dating myself. If you've ever heard of the cereal Freakies, you're definitely Gen X. But we didn't know that stuff was really bad for us until now, right? You hit your 30s and your 40s, and you're like, oh, geez, yeah, that's not. And so I think what we knew about feeding horses, everything about taking care of horses has changed in the last 10, 20 years. And that's just because we are learning more about what works and what doesn't for them. If you have been feeding your horses something different and you're afraid to change, it's okay. It's okay to question everything because there's a lot of new things out there. And who has the time to go research every new feed product and every new peer-reviewed paper on equine nutrition? That's what the feed company's for. That's what our nutritionists are for. And to some extent, that's what podcasts like mine are for, is to help get the right information out to our listeners. But then they have to go and do their own research. We're just giving them a starting point. Even with the way Triple Crown, first of all, one of the reasons I'm so happy that you decided to partner with Stall and Stable is because I love the way you designed your packaging, your website, your educational materials, is because you make it easy for the end user to, I'll use the word, to digest what you're putting out there, to understand how your products work. So you're kind of consolidating and synthesizing all of the information that's out there in nutrition and making it much easier for us to absorb.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And equine nutrition is vast and ever changing, right? We're always learning new things, especially in terms of carbohydrates. That the research on that is still developing, new ideas coming out, new thoughts coming out. We try to be here so we can have that real-time conversation. So Facebook, text messaging, calling, emailing, like you'll get a real person who actually knows what they're talking about, not just someone who's going to, oh, let me take your number and I'll have someone call you back.
Right. 3 months later, you get a call from some random person, or you get an AI generated voice that wants to repeat what's ever on your website. That makes me no.
All of us. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
But speaking about new products and development, I wanted to ask you this question. This is a personal question. I noticed that you have something new. It's called functional wafers. And I read a little bit about them and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can use this for my positive reinforcement training because they're just so easy to deliver and they're pretty safe. Tell me about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've recently come out with a line of functional wafers. There's one that addresses gut issues, one that addresses hoof issues, and one that addresses coat and skin issues as well. And so our goal with that was to make these little nutrient bites that can be used kind of as a treat, but they're actual functional supplement. So not only can you use it as like training treats or like a little cookie for your horse, but they also have actual recommended levels of specific nutrients to address those different issues that your horse may be coming up with.
And how would you use them if you're not, like for me, for using them for training, you take a handful and then they're used very specifically when you are training. But how would you use them if you're not using them in a training scenario?
You could use them just like as a treat. Your horse comes over to visit with you. You can give them those as a treat. We recommend 30 wafers for a 1,000-pound horse to get the recommended amount of supplementation for the issue. They're very, very light. Around the size of a nickel in diameter, very lightweight. And so you can just kind of give them in your hand as like a little treat. I actually had a customer call me the other day. She has been really struggling with getting her horse to take Presend. He is upset about everything and does not want the Presend. She put the Presend in with 15 of the little wafers and mixed them around, and he ate them right up. And she was just over the moon because he's got some severe Cushing symptoms going on. So she was really struggling to get that into him. And he wouldn't let her syringe him anymore, even. That's how bad it was. So she was just like over the moon about it. But you could sprinkle them on their feed if you don't want to offer as a treat. The gut wafers, I like to have a couple just before you're going to ride, like as you're tacking up. That helps to give a little additional buffering and things like that. Really
Gut
simple.
wafers.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are brilliant. The light bulb just went off in my head. I'm not so brilliant. That because, I got a handful of alfalfa that I give to my mare before I ride her, or which can be a little bit messy, especially, I'm messy. So it would be nice to have a little tidy wafer that I can just click and feed or sprinkle it on top. Sometimes Brody gets a little annoyed because I put loose minerals and I sprinkle it on top of his ration balancer. And he's like, that's a little too salty for me. I'm not feeling it today. So if I throw a couple of wafers on, it'll entice him. He's funny because if Brody could eat Cheez-Its and drink whiskey and smoke cigars, that would be his dietary profile. So he's like, how come Susie gets the Triple Crown Senior? She gets the delicious stuff. What am I, chopped liver? So if I throw him a couple of wafers, I bet he'll be happy.
I have not had someone call me and say that their horse didn't like them yet. So they're pretty popular. And, I had a bag of them on my desk and my dogs were like sniffing around and I was like, this is for horses. Probably won't kill you, but this is for horses.
Yeah. It's like that health food that you have to eat and then you finally incorporate it into your diet and you're like, this is pretty good. What was, now it's not health food. It's not like eating cardboard. It's something delicious like avocados, right? So I'm trying to replace bad fats with good fats. Avocados are good fats. And now I'm like, avocados are delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're my wafer. They're my functional wafer.
Yeah.
Okay. That is all we have time for today. So listeners, I will post links at stallandstable.com in this episode's show notes so you can find out more information about what we talked about. You'll get a link to contact Triple Crown. You will more than likely get Stacy on the other end of your inquiry. So just go to stallandstable.com and you can do a little further research on this. Stacy, as always, I am grateful for your time. It's so much fun to talk to you. So thanks for coming back.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you so much to your listeners for hearing me out. If you have any questions or concerns, call us at Triple Crown. I'm happy to help.
Many thanks once again to Stacy Andersen from Triple Crown Nutrition. Woo, right? There's so much information to process, but we're going to make it a little bit easier for you. If you want to find more information about this topic, you can go to stallandstable.com, look up episode 148 show notes, and I'll be sure to provide links to further reading and resources at the Triple Crown Nutrition website. We welcome questions from listeners, so please feel free to submit your questions. If you are a Stall and Stable Full Board subscriber, those are the podcast episodes that we have behind a paywall at Apple Podcasts. If you do subscribe there, please feel free to submit your questions. We will address those with priority. If you are a horse professional and you need some assistance with your business, please contact us. Our Stall and Stable business coaching services are up and running. And in fact, we are now blessed with the presence of Mr. Buck Harris, who will be providing a good chunk of the business planning and coaching services. I will still be a part of that, but as I undertake my graduate studies, Buck is going to take over a little bit more, especially on the financial side. So if you are struggling with your numbers, and who is not, Buck may be the person that you go to. But if you want to find out more about how we're configuring the business coaching side of Stall and Stable, including a free 30-minute discovery call, go to the business coaching section of our website to find out more. Many, many, many thanks to our sponsors, but also huge thank you to our listeners, especially those that weigh in on social media when I am advocating for compassionate horse training, the welfare of horses. I'm speaking up, I'm speaking out, and when I do so, quite often there are crickets. So for those of you who've stepped up to the plate and lent your compassionate voices to the conversation there, I am grateful. Let's keep these conversations going. They are important and they are beginning to make a dent in the welfare of horses for pleasure and for sport. And that is going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.